It's the summertime, so you know that means a lot of rankings are coming out right now. We got some more rankings on Jaren Jackson Jr., on Morant. We're going to get into that. And plus, one media outlet believes that the Grizzlies could have a top 10 starting lineup in the NBA this upcoming season. We're going to break it down coming up right here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I'm your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. And you know what day of the week it is. My co-host Joe Mullinax isn't here. This is about the third Friday in a row that he's leaving. I think he's just throwing me out there to take over now. And if that's cool with y'all, it's cool with me. So guess what? It's Friday. It's Friday, and we got to get down on Friday. So appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. Remember that Locked On Grizzlies, make it your first listen each and every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We got a jam-packed episode for you today. If you're tuning in, via an audio platform, we're going to talk about Jaren and the rankings. We're going to talk about some Grizzlies starting lineup things, and we're going to give a shout out to a former Grizzlies as well. If you're tuning in on YouTube, then you see kind of the list of the rundown. But without further ado, we're going to get into it. We got to talk about Jaren. We've been talking about those guys a lot this offseason. They both have had a lot going on, whether it be the injury with Jaren Jackson Jr., the things he's doing off the floor. Morant. I was talking to someone yesterday and just like Morant has had a really good summer. It's been a summer full of positivity and great things for him with his shoe, the tour, and Nike. I feel like he has, yes, I know him. Some people say, oh, you're the Grizzlies beat writer or whatever, but I know my signature shoes and I pay attention to them. And for me, for my money right now, Morant, the Ja 3 is probably the best SIG in the NBA right now. And I put it right up there. Sabrina Ionescu to me has the best signature shoe in the WNBA. And I feel like we'll see, but I feel like might get her beat. I mean, he has a very unique shoe. The Ja 3 just came out yesterday for the fans, the Max Volume. Ja 3 is now available. I believe it's being called on the Nike website, the price of admission Ja 3. So go check it out. Let's get into these Grizzlies players' 2K ratings. Now, when I talk about 2K ratings, I always like to preface it with this point because this isn't about the game. We're not talking about what these guys can do on the video game and, things like that. I want to keep our audience that doesn't play the video games. I want to keep you guys tuned in with me and stick with me here because basically when we do these segments, to me, 2K is just another extension of player rankings. Like we have our own separate player rankings, as Joe did, talk about in the previous episode. We have the Locked On Group, NBA player rankings. Then there's going to be other outlets, other mainstream media outlets will come out with their player rankings. And as that time comes, Joe is infamous for, kind of not agreeing with the ESPN player rankings, as we get closer to the season. But we're going to get into all of that. And the 2K player ranking is another example of those rankings. 2K, I think, does a really good job of just learning the intricacies of the players. And for those that are the gamers, that they don't just throw a number out there and say, this is a guy's rating. 2K is so advanced to the point now, it's skill by skill. They're rating guys by their ability to shoot off the dribble, left-handed hook shot, right-handed hook shot, mid-range shots, three-point shots. It's very detailed to the point that I feel like there's a platform for us to talk about the idea of what these rankings are and where the Grizzlies players are. Now, starting with Jaren Jackson Jr. because he is the lower ranked of the two. Jaren Jackson Jr. came out with his name appeared when NBA 2K released its players ranked in the 30th through the 21 on this version of NBA 2K. And Jaren Jackson Jr. is the 29th ranked player on NBA 2K with an 89 overall rating. We don't really care about the rating because, again, this is less about the game. This is more about where he kind of falls in the hierarchy of players according to NBA 2K. So just to give you some list of some names here as we go through them. If you go through the players ranked 40th through 31st, these are the players that Jaren Jackson Jr. is ranked above. Jimmy Butler, Derek White, Evisa Zubac, Zion Williamson, Darius Garland, LaMelo Ball, Alperen Sengun, Domantas Sabonis, Damian Lillard, Chet Holmgren. Those are some of the names that Jaren Jackson Jr. is above. He's also above Bam Adebayo, who's ranked 30th. And then the players who are right above Jaren Jackson Jr., you got James Harden, Pascal Siakam, Evan Mobley, Paolo Banchero, Kyrie Irving, Trae Young, Jaylen Brown, Jalen Williams at OKC. Now, when we talked about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s block rating in a recent episode and his post-scoring numbers and how we weren't really fans of that, I remember in that episode, I said that, well, based on these numbers, Jaren's 2K rating is going to come back and we're not going to be a fan of it either. And I say all that to say, I'm okay with Jaren being ranked the number 29 player in the NBA. That means the Grizzlies have 2 top 30 players. We said some of those names that Jaren is ranked above, and I'm going to go through it again really quick. Just a couple of names. He's above Jimmy Butler on here. Evisa Zubac, who we just saw have an incredible season. Zion Williamson, injuries, but you know what Zion Williamson can be. Alperen Sengun, who's been a focal point over there. Domantas Sabonis in Sacramento. Chet Holmgren in OKC. These are players that Jaren Jackson Jr. is rated above. If he plays better than all of those players this upcoming season, that's probably going to be a really good year. It's probably going to be a really, really good season. Then the players you look at, he's kind of in the same range as James Harden, Pascal Siakam, Evan Mobley, Paolo, Kyrie, Trae Young, Jaylen Brown, Jalen Williams. Like, I'm okay with that. I'm not going to come on here and throw a fit about Jaren Jackson Jr. being ranked 29th. If you got a problem with it, you let me know. You go in the comments on Locked On Grizzlies and say, Michael, I do not agree with that rating. I think he's too high. I think he's too low. I think it's just fine. This shows me that, one, we didn't see it in the block rating, but clearly there is defensive value in this game with Jaren Jackson Jr. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is somewhere around top 30 players in the NBA. And for the Grizzlies to have 2 players who are viewed in the top 30 of the NBA, that'll bode well for what we're going to talk about in our next segment. So make sure you stay tuned for that as well. But getting into Ja Morant, who was ranked in the next group of players, which is the players that are ranked between the 20th and the 11th best players. Ja Morant was ranked 19th in the NBA. So behind him is Devin Booker at 20th. And we just talked about the guys who are in that 30 to 21 range with Jaren. But here are some of the other players that Ja's right behind. He's at 19. Here's 18 through 11 right here. Karl Anthony Towns, Joel Embiid, Cade Cunningham, Kawhi Leonard, Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Brunson, Anthony Davis, Donovan Mitchell. I see a lot of names on that list, or if you go back a couple years ago, you'd say there's no way that player's ahead of Ja Morant. But again, when you get the bump, right? When you win, when you have a lot of success, and that's what happened with Jalen Brunson. That's what happened with Tyrese Halliburton. That's what happened, with Cade Cunningham. That's 3 players who have kind of, ascended while the teams have ascended as well. Do I think that Tyrese Halliburton is better than Ja Morant just player for player? I don't. And I saw the highs of Tyrese Halliburton in the playoffs, but I saw the lows too. And, we'll see, how it plays out long term, but I just don't. Do I think that Jalen Brunson? I think Jalen Brunson has certain skills. He's a better closer. We saw him be one of the best clutch scorers in the NBA this past season. But when you talk about talent-wise, that's another advantage that Ja has. You get to Cade Cunningham, I think that's a different conversation, because Cade Cunningham to me is that prototypical 6'6". He can guard both ends, which is something that the Grizzlies, it's been challenging for Ja Morant at times. That's kind of been the question. Can Ja Morant be that player who's going to guard, both ends of the floor? And in a way, the Grizzlies kind of having a backcourt of Desmond Bane and Ja Morant, 2 guys who aren't really graded out, at least, on their scale, as above average defenders. You can't win championships with 2 guys like that. It's kind of become, a common assumption. And in so many words, Zach Kleiman and Grizzlies lore were saying things like that. But Ja Morant being ranked 19th, another one that I don't really have a big problem with. Availability is going to be the big thing. If Ja Morant's available, guess what? He'll be higher than 19th. I think it was 2023. Ja Morant, I believe on ESPN, was ranked 9th or something. He was like the 9th ranked player. And when we pointed it out, I remember Ja said, "Oh, I want to come for the top spot." He wants to come for the top spot. I think he still has that same mentality. But at the end of the day, again, when it comes to Ja Morant, it's a question of health. How healthy can Ja Morant be for the Grizzlies? If he's healthy, we saw this past season, especially towards the end of the season, especially in Game 3 against OKC. You want to remember how good Ja Morant can be when he's at his best. Just go watch that first half of Game 3. It's a good reminder of what Ja Morant can be when he's healthy. But when he's healthy, he's in the starting lineup. And we got to talk about the Grizzlies starting lineup in our next segment coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that segment, remember that today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with some friends or some family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands, and that's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, get you some merch, or you can even invite a bigger group to come with you. Come join me at the game, because Gametime makes that just possible for you. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop closer that you get the first pitch. So you remember that if you're in Memphis right now and you're a Braves fan like me, you know that Gwinnett is in town, and it might be a good chance to go check out the Braves, the Gwinnett squad over at AutoZone Park. So look, they got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guaranteed. Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game in particular. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Make sure you go take that out now at Gametime. The Memphis Grizzlies starting lineup isn't set yet. We've talked about this in previous episodes. I don't have to go too far down that. We talked about the options and all the different names. I've written about this over at the Commercial Appeal as well. But if you talk about projections, if you talk about what we expect, if you talk about what we think, the commonality at this point is the Grizzlies starting lineup will be Ja Morant, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Jalen Wells, Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey when the full five is healthy. Shout out to the people over there at Bleacher Report. Greg Swartz of Bleacher Report did a ranking recently of the top starting lineups in the NBA, power ranking all the starting lineups in the NBA. And if you're familiar with the Bleacher Report app, like it starts at 30 and you have to scroll up and you got to scroll up and you got to scroll up and you got to scroll up. And as I'm scrolling, I'm like, I still don't see the Grizzlies. Then I'm at 20. So I still don't see the Grizzlies. I'm like, okay. Top 15 lineup. Still don't see the Grizzlies. I'm like, okay. Hey, Greg Swartz likes the Grizzlies. And then you get to 12. I'm like, okay. Now I got to slow down a little bit because they're going to pop up at some point, right? Then they're not there at 11 because 12 was the Atlanta Hawks, which I think is going to be a really good team, by the way. 11, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Same Minnesota Timberwolves team that has had some really good playoff success last couple years. Like we're talking Western Conference Finals type team. Then I go to 10, Los Angeles Lakers with Luka, with LeBron, with DeAndre Ayton, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura possibly. That's okay, pretty high on the Grizzlies. And I scroll up one more, and then boom, the Beale Street Bears popped up at number 9 on this list. And his projected starting lineup, similar to the one that we've, kind of outlined. Ja Morant, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Jalen Wells, Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey. And one of the biggest arguing points in this story from Bleacher Report, which is something This is something we've talked about a little bit, but we haven't really dived into it yet. I've been trying to save this to closer to the season. But Bleacher Report jumped out there. So we got to talk about it now because I've been trying to save this to close to the season because this is something that's going to eventually come up. It's one of those things where you lose Desmond Bane. And historically speaking, you've been following the Grizzlies really close over the last few years. When Desmond Bane exits the game, I don't know how else to say this, but the Grizzlies haven't been a good team. But this past season, if you take him out of the starting lineup, you put those other guys out there, and this is what Bleacher Report pointed out. I saw this number already. Can't take credit for it because they pointed it out. They put it in print. It says, even without Desmond Bane, the four-man unit of Morant, Wells, Jackson, and Edey had a sparkling net rating of 21.9. This is via cleaning the glass, by the way. They got this off cleaning the glass, so it's filtering out, anything. It's filtering out all the other numbers. That starting lineup was that good. That four-man group, excuse me. And if you follow Locked On Grizzlies last season, you noticed that we commonly talked about how good the starting lineup's net rating was. I know people had their questions about the closing game moments with, Zach Edey and how Desmond Bane, close games, Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., the whole crew, etc. But at the end of the day, the Grizzlies, when those four guys win the game, this is Desmond Bane's off the team now. So we're saying Morant, Wells, Jackson, and Edey. 21.9. You take Dez off the floor. Now you insert Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in this situation. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is one of those guys. I call him more with less. Some people call him role players. Some people call him 3 and D. I call him players that you can get more with less. The ball doesn't have to be in his hands that much. He's not saying, hey, I need 3 dribbles on this possession. He's just standing in the corner over there. But when it comes there, he's going to be ready for his shot. He's still someone that the defense is going to honor. And then on the other end, he's going to play his butt off on the defensive end, giving you potentially, and what we expect, better defense than you got from Desmond Bane. So you upgrade on the defensive end. But guess what? You lose something on the offensive end without Desmond Bane. But do you? Is it really that simple? You take out Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. You take out Desmond Bane, 20-point per game scorer, incredible 3-point shooter. You lose the offensive ability. Yes, that's true, but there's a but here. And we talked about this a little bit as we talked about Ja and Jaren over the course of this offseason. I'm a believer that lineups, again, the OG Locked On Grizzlies follows. You'll remember me saying probably a year or two ago, I used to always say this idea of game over name. And it's fixated on the point that the players that you put on the floor have to kind of work well together. You can put 5 brilliant NBA players who like the ball in their hands on the floor at the same time. If these players can't play well off of each other, they're going to stink. Look at the history of the NBA. Look at the Phoenix Suns last year. You tell me you put Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant on the same team. That should be an incredible team. But again, wasn't a great mix. Did not really work out. Didn't even make the playoffs. Didn't even make the play-in. But that's neither here nor there. The point that I'm making is when you put in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, he's not Desmond Bane. And Desmond Bane is a great plug-and-play player. Desmond Bane's the guy who's going to knock down some 3-point shots. Desmond Bane's going to compete on the defensive end. He's not the greatest defender, but you'll never say, man, Desmond Bane's not even trying on defense. What's that about? He's just letting this man cook him. That was never Des. But Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has the defensive talent to go from he's not letting this man cook him that he's trying hard to he's limiting the guy that's trying to go at him. The point that I'm going to make here is you lose Desmond Bane's scoring overall. Where I think the loss of Desmond Bane affects you most is when Ja Morant goes out of the game. When Jaren Jackson Jr. goes out of the game. But if we're talking about from a starting lineup standpoint, from a closing standpoint, I think you're fine if you have 2 bona fide, I can put the ball in the basket anytime guys in the game. Look across the NBA. Look across the league. You got two guys. You don't need three. I mean, big threes are cool, whatever. But you got two guys that can 5 second on the shot clock, give me the ball, everybody move. I got this. In theory, the Grizzlies have that. Jaren Jackson Jr., we talked about it, has graded out as one of the best isolation scorers in the NBA over the last 3 seasons. Ja Morant, if you look at his isolation numbers over the course of seasons, they're not good. It's bad. But if you look at Ja Morant's numbers on shots where he's going for the tie or the game-winning basket in the closing minute of a game, one of the best in the NBA. I don't know how he finds that magic at the end of the games that sometimes, is not there in his body in other stretches of the fourth quarter with 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 3 minutes in clutch time situations or whatever the case may be. But when the game is on the line, Ja Morant, the whole call 12, you call 12 and he's going to pick up the phone more times than not. The point here is you got two guys who are capable of averaging 22, 23. Ja at his best has averaged 27 points a game. You got two guys capable of combining for 50 points a game. A lot of duos in the league don't do that. All you need around them is complementary guys who play their roles well. Guess what? Zach Edey, his role is to be physical, be an enforcer with his screen setting, and to be a great rebounder. He showed signs of being really good in all of those areas as a rookie. Should take a step forward. The roles of Jalen Wells and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, in some way, shape, or form, is centered around them bringing the intensity on the defensive end and them being able to knock down those shots when guys say, we're going to collapse the play on Ja and we're going to make him pass to one of those guys. Or they say, Jaren Jackson Jr., we're playing a small ball lineup. We got to double team him, and they're going to make Jalen Wells and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope knock down some shots. They got to be able to knock those down. And as the numbers showed, especially over the course, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has 2 rings to show for it. When Jokic was getting that trouble, or Jamal Murray was getting that trouble, or LeBron James was getting that trouble, or Anthony Davis was getting that trouble, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was knocking them down in the playoffs. Game on the line. He's proven he can do it. Now, with the Magic, it wasn't as pretty. So we'll see how that transitions to Memphis. But he's proven that he can do it. And Jalen Wells, in a much smaller sample size, we're talking about 78, 79 games last season, showed the same ability. Now, he tailed off toward the end of the season, but Jalen Wells was one of the more consistent players on the Grizzlies for a large part of last season. Can this starting lineup potentially be better? We're gonna dive into that over the course of the next few weeks. But I do like what Greg said about those 4 players, because you're simply inserting Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Basketball is a simple game. Sometimes we overthink it. You're simply inserting Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. You're taking out Desmond Bane. I've talked about the fact that, look, if you want to get into the personalities and things like that, Ja Morant naturally defers to Desmond Bane sometimes because Desmond Bane's really good, and Ja Morant's a point guard, and he wants his guy to eat. He wants his guy to get his buckets. There's no Desmond Bane. Jalen Wells is not Desmond Bane. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is not Desmond Bane. Those are not guys that you defer the ball to. You say here, and you get out the way like you can do with Desmond Bane. So this is going to force Ja to be even more aggressive, to get downhill, to be that guy that many people in Memphis believe that he can be. And it's going to force Jaren to do the same thing. So that's just important to point out. But I do think the idea that this Grizzlies team could have a top 10 starting lineup is not too far-fetched. When you hear it out loud, Grizzlies top 10 starting lineup, there is some, it's like, maybe, but we'll see. But it is something that I think is very possible. It's very plausible, especially after the way we just broke that down. Come up here on Locked On Grizzlies. We got to shout out a former Grizzly. He's a fellow Memphian. He's a Chicago native as well. But we got to shout him out coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies. Derrick Rose put his time in the city of Memphis. First, when he signed with the Memphis Tigers, and I believe it was right ahead of the 2007-2008 season. And Derrick Rose joins the Memphis Tigers, leads them to one of the best seasons, if not the best season, in program history. gets drafted to Chicago, where he's a native and goes on to have a great career. Chicago, youngest MVP, NBA history, all these good things. But as his career ends, he ends up back in Memphis with the Grizzlies. Played a season there. It's funny because the Grizzlies thought he was coming back for year 2, and Derrick Rose said, actually, I'm going to retire. Thank you for the opportunity. Uh, Thank you for the chance to play back in Memphis, where it started in college, but it's time for me to hang him up. Derrick Rose retires, and that's that. Well, now you're starting to see Derrick Rose start to get his flowers, no pun intended. And the Chicago Bulls announced on yesterday that Derrick Rose, will be getting his jersey number retired. His number 1 jersey will be retired. I believe they're going to do it on January the 24th, 2026. Shout out to Derrick Rose. That's a huge accomplishment. Um, love that for him. And Derrick Rose's career is not short of any trial and error, whether it was the injuries, whether it was the off-court issues. Derrick Rose went through a lot over the course of his NBA career, but I shot him out in this segment because he was a player that I met later in his career, and the Grizzlies brought him in, and there was this idea of Derrick Rose kind of being this veteran that the Grizzlies needed. And one thing that I noticed initially, and many of you did, you could tell by the quotes that he gave, Derrick Rose was going to do it his way. It wasn't this is how the NBA leads, so I'm going to lead just like the rest of the NBA. Derrick Rose straight up said in his intro, like, I'm not here to babysit. I'm not coming here to babysit these guys. These are grown men. And as other players, you can respect that because you are grown men. You do feel like, hey, look, like, I'm gonna listen to him, but at the same time, like, I've been around here a little bit as well. I'm sure that's how, in some way, shape, or form, how some of those guys who have put years in, like the Jaren Santis of the world, when Derrick Rose got here. But there is wisdom in the fact that Derrick Rose has that. I've been there. I've been the MVP. I've been to the Eastern Conference Finals, played against LeBron James in series, and I've had injuries come at what feels like an inopportune time for me. And his time in Memphis was short, but again, you felt the impact, whether it was Ja, whether it was Jaren. And one of the more notable instances of that, in my opinion, was the season after Derrick Rose leaves Memphis. Ja Morant says, I'm not dunking anymore. I don't think that's coincidence, because after Ja Morant ended the previous season, he goes into the offseason. There's this whole big conversation about the idea that Ja's got to, land better and things like that. And that's exactly what Derrick Rose worked on earlier in his career, post ACL injury. He went to the floater more and basically stayed out of harm's way and extended his career much longer than what some people thought at the time when he was going through all those different injuries and things like that. Shout out to Derrick Rose. That's what this segment is about. Shout out to what he's meant to Memphis, whether it be through the Tigers or whether it be through the Grizzlies, and whether it be, still with him, moving his family here and things like that. He's from Chicago, like Tony Allen, but he is here. He is a Memphis guy. He's very tight with, Tony Allen, who's still here a lot of the time. Then you got other people, he played college ball with Willie Kemp, who coaches at Whitehaven High School. Now he's done a lot of things in the community as well. Shout out to Derrick Rose. I wanted to make sure we got a segment to shout out him for what he did in his time with the Grizzlies. It was one season, but you're still seeing little sprinklings of, what he meant to the Grizzlies, what he meant to the team during that time. But thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. For your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast where there is no offseason. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. We'll be back with you next week. Me and Joe Mullinax will be back together as we break down all things Locked On Grizzlies, all things Memphis Grizzlies. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But until next time, remember that Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.